Hello, and welcome to Edupedia World. Today, we're going to cover the chapter Employee Safety and Health. Now, human resources professionals play an important role in ensuring employee health and safety, as they know the workplace, the employees, and their job demands. While human resources professionals are not expected to know the technical aspects of work health and safety, they should know when and how to use existing resources to respond to employee concerns. In many organizations, health and safety responsibilities are within the Human Resources Department. In order to meet these responsibilities, human resources professionals must understand the health and safety responsibilities of employers, managers, supervisors, and employees within the organization. They must also implement personnel management policies to ensure that everyone in the workplace is aware of his or her responsibilities. They must also establish effective ways of meeting health and safety responsibilities and ensure that employees fulfill their health and safety responsibilities as outlined in the organizational policies and programs. Now, injuries aren't just problems in dangerous industries like construction. So, for example, every year more than 15,000 reportable injuries or illnesses occur at manufacturers of computers and computer peripherals. Even if you take the example of commercial kitchens, they have hazards like knives and slippery floors. And new computers contribute to sick building syndrome. They have symptoms like headaches and sniffles, which some experts blame on poor ventilation. And office work is susceptible to other health problems, including repetitive trauma injuries related to computer use, respiratory illnesses stemming from indoor air quality, and high levels of stress as well. Now, occupational health and safety. Occupational safety laws differ from country to country. The health and safety of employees working in factories, mines, etc. have been given high importance in India. And the Constitution of India has provisions to ensure that the health and well-being of all employees are protected. And it is the duty of the state to ensure this protection. Now, United States Congress has also passed the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 to assure so far as possible every working man and woman in the nation safe and healthful working conditions and to preserve our human resources. The only employers it doesn't cover are self-employed persons, farms in which only immediate members of the employer's family work, and some workplaces already protected by other federal agencies. So what should you do when OSHA inspectors unexpectedly show up? So during the initial contact, you need to restrict the admittance until the manager in charge or the OSHA coordinator is on site. Check the inspector's credentials and then ask the inspector why he or she is inspecting your workplace. Is it complaints or is it just a scheduled visit? If the inspection stems from a complaint, you are entitled to know whether the person is a current employee, though you're not allowed to know the person's name. Notify your counsel who would review all documents and information. Next, during the opening conference, you need to establish the focus and scope of the planned inspection. Discuss the procedures for protecting trade secret areas. And then show the inspector you have safety programs in place. He or she may not even go to the workflow if your paperwork is complete and up to date. Next step would be to accompany the inspector and take detailed notes. If the inspector takes a photo or video, you should also do that. Ask for duplicates of all physical samples and copies of all test results. Be helpful and cooperative, but don't volunteer information. To the extent possible, immediately correct any violation the inspector identifies. So what causes accidents? There are three basic causes of workplace accidents. One is chance occurrences, next is unsafe conditions, and employees' unsafe acts. Now, chance occurrence is nothing but something like, walking past a window and then someone hits a ball through it. So these are more or less beyond a management's control. So we will therefore focus on unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. Now, unsafe conditions are a main cause of accidents. They include things like improperly guarded equipment, defective equipment, hazardous procedures, that is in or around machines or equipment, unsafe storage, which is congestion or overloading something, improper illumination, that is glare or insufficient light, improper ventilation, which is insufficient air change or impure air source. The solution here is to identify and eliminate the unsafe conditions. The main aim of the OSHA standards is to address these mechanical and physical accident causing conditions. The employer's safety department, if any, and its human resource managers and top managers should take responsibility for identifying unsafe conditions. So, danger zones. While accidents can happen anywhere, there are some high danger zones. About 1/3 of industrial accidents occur around forklift trucks, wheelbarrows, and other handling and lifting areas. The most serious accidents usually occur by metal and woodworking machines. And also, these happen around transmissions machineries like gears, pulleys, and flywheels. And certain jobs are inherently more dangerous. So, for example, the job of a crane operator results in about 3 times more hospital visits than does the job of the supervisor. Now, the second basic cause, which is the unsafe acts. Now, unsafe acts can undo even the best attempts to reduce unsafe conditions. The problem is that there are no easy answers to the question of what causes people to act recklessly. It may seem intuitively obvious that some people are simply accident prone, but the research isn't that clear. On closer inspection, it turns out some accident repeaters were just unlucky or may have been more meticulous about reporting their accidents. However, there is a growing evidence that people with specific traits may indeed be accident prone. So, for example, people who are impulsive, sensation seeking, extremely extroverted, and less conscientious are more likely to have accidents. Now, how to prevent accidents? In practice, accident prevention boils down to 2 basic activities. One is reducing unsafe conditions, and 2 is reducing unsafe acts. In large facilities, the chief safety officer is responsible for this. And in smaller firms, managers, including those from human resources, plant management, and first-line managers, share these responsibilities. So, reducing unsafe condition is always an employer's first line of defense in accident prevention. And safety engineers should design jobs to remove or reduce physical hazards. Employers increasingly use computerized tools to design safer equipment. So, for example, a company called Design Safe, they help automate the tasks of hazard analysis, risk management, and identifying safety options. Design Safe helps a safety designer choose the most appropriate safety control device for keeping the worker safe, such as adjustable enclosures, presence sensing devices, and personal protective equipment. Sometimes a solution for eliminating an unsafe condition is obvious, and sometimes it's more subtle. So, for example, slips and falls are often the result of slippery floors. So, obvious remedies include floor mats and better lighting. Perhaps less obviously, personal safety gear like slip-resistant footwear with grooved soles can also reduce slips and falls. Now, personal protective equipment. Getting employees to wear personal protective equipment is a famously difficult chore. So, wearability is important. In addition to providing reliable protection, protective gear should fit properly. Be easy to care for, and you should also be able to maintain and repair it easily. And it should be flexible and lightweight, and it should also provide comfort and reduce heat stress. And it should be relatively easy to put on and take off. And of course, it should be easy to clean and dispose of and recycle as well. Now, reducing unsafe acts. So, although reducing unsafe conditions is the first line of defense, human misbehavior can short circuit even the best safety efforts. So, sometimes the misbehavior is intentional, but often it's not. So, for example, distractions, not noticing moving or stationary objects or that a floor is wet, often causes accidents. And ironically, making a job safer with machine guards or personal protective equipment lowers people's risk perceptions and thus can lead to an increase in at-risk behavior. So the manager plays a central role in reducing unsafe acts. So for example, supervisors should praise employees when they choose safety behaviors. They should also listen when employees offer safety suggestions, concerns, or complaints. And they should be a good example, for instance, by following every safety rule and procedure. Now, using behavior-based safety, that's another method. So behavior-based safety means identifying the worker behaviors that contribute to accidents and then training workers to avoid these behaviors. So for example, Tenneco Corporation, they implemented a behavior-based safety program at its 70 manufacturing sites in 20 countries. The firm selected internal consultants from among its quality managers, training managers, engineers, and production workers. Now, after training, the internal consultants identified 5 critical behaviors for Tenneco's first safety program, such as eyes on task. Does the employee watch his or her hands while performing a task? The consultants made observations, collected data regarding the behavior, and then instituted training programs to get employees to perform these 5 behaviors properly. Then using employee participation. There are 2 good reasons to involve employees in designing the safety program. First, employees are often your best source of ideas about what the problems are and how to solve them. Second, employees' involvement tends to encourage employees to accept the safety program. So, for example, when the International Truck and Engine Corporation began designing its new robot-based plant in Springfield, Ohio, management chose to involve employees in designing the new facility. So management appointed joint labor management safety teams for each department. And these worked with project engineers to start designing safeguards for the robot equipment. The company even sent one safety team to Japan to watch the robot machines in action and to develop a checklist of items that the safety teams needed to address. Back in Ohio, this team worked with employees to identify possible hazards and to develop new devices to protect the employees. And last but not the least, conduct safety and health audits and inspections. Again, however, reducing unsafe acts is no substitute for eliminating hazards. Managers should therefore routinely inspect for possible problems using safety audit or checklists as aids. Now, investigate all accidents and near misses. Enable employees to notify managers about hazards, and employee safety committees should evaluate safety adequacy, conduct and monitor safety audit findings, and suggest strategies for improving health and safety performance. Now, controlling workers' compensation costs. Now, before the accident happened, that is where you're trying to curb or prevent accidents from happening, make sure you communicate written safety and substance abuse policies to workers and then strictly enforce these policies. Now, in case an accident has happened, then be proactive about providing first aid and make sure the worker gets quick medical attention. Also, make it clear that you are interested in the injured worker and his or her fears and questions. Be involved in the worker. Then document the accident and file the required reports and encourage a speedy return to work. Now, dealing with substance abuse. So many employers dealing with alcohol and substance abuse begins with substance abuse testing. And it's increasingly unusual to find employers who don't at least test job candidates for substance abuse before formally hiring them. and many states are instituting mandatory random drug testing for high-hazard workers. So there's some debate about whether drug tests reduce workplace accidents. One answer seems to be that pre-employment tests pick up only about half the workplace drug users. So ongoing random testing is advisable. One study conducted in 3 hotels concluded that pre-employment drug testing has little effect on workplace accidents. However, a combination of pre-employment and random ongoing testing was associated with a significant reduction in workplace accidents. Training supervisors to identify alcoholics or drug abusers and the problems they create is advisable. However, supervisors are in a tricky position. They should be the company's first line of defense in combating workplace drug abuse, but should avoid becoming detectives or medical diagnosticians. So these are a few guidelines supervisors can follow. One is, if an employee appears to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, ask how the employee feels and look for signs of impairment such as slurred speech, and send an employee judged unfit for duty home. Second, make a written record of your observations and follow up each incident. In addition, inform workers of the number of warnings the company will tolerate before requiring termination. Third, refer the troubled employee to the company's employee assistant program. The violence at work. Now, an example of a disgruntled employee that walked into Chrysler's Ohio Jeep assembly plant and fatally shot one worker after reportedly being involved in an argument with a supervisor. Now, violence against employees is an enormous problem at work. So, some of the things to combat this, to reduce workplace violence, one is heightened security measures. Heightened security measures are an employee's first line of defense. Improve the external lighting. Use drop safes to minimize cash on hand and post signs noting that only a limited amount of cash is on hand. Install silent alarms and surveillance cameras and increase the number of staff on duty. Provide staff training in conflict resolution and non-violence response, and close establishments during high-risk hours late at night. Improve employee screening. That testing can screen out those prone to workplace aggression is clear. In one study, researchers measured the relationship among personal characteristics such as a trait as anger and the attitude towards revenge. And the researchers concluded that measurable individual differences like trait anger account for more than 60% of the variance in our measure of the incidence of workplace aggression. Another thing that we can do is workplace violence training. So vendors offer video violence training programs, and these explain what workplace violence is, identify its causes and signs, and offer tips to supervisors on how to prevent it and what to do when it occurs. Employers should also train supervisors to identify the clues that typically precede violent incidents. And these include typical profiles. A typical perpetrator is usually male between the ages of 25 and 40 and exhibit an inability to handle stress, manipulative behavior, and steady complaining. Of course, many non-violent people exhibit such traits too. However, perpetrators also tend to exhibit other behaviors such as verbal threats. That is, they harbor grudges and often talk about what they may do, such as that propane tank in the back could blow up easily, right? Also, physical actions. Troubled employees may try to intimidate others, gain access to places where they do not belong, or flash a concealed weapon. So these are things that you need to look out for. Frustration. Most cases involve an employee who has a frustrated sense of entitlement to a promotion, for example. Obsession is also another case. An employee may hold a grudge against a co-worker or supervisor, and some cases stem from romantic interests. The next point is organizational justice. Right? At work, as 3 researchers said, violence typically occurs in response to a perceived injustice. So researchers asked respondents to reply to this. Think back over your time as an employee in your current organization when you've been offended by another person. And the researchers also asked the respondents how they reacted to the offense. An employee who blamed another for some personal affront was more likely to try to seek revenge and less likely to seek reconciliation. Now, enhanced attention to employee retention and dismissal. Employees also need effective procedures for identifying and dealing with potentially lethal employees. Start with adopting a workplace violence policy that outlines unacceptable employee behavior and a zero tolerance policy towards workplace violence. And behaviors to watch out for include things like an act of violence on or off the job, or maybe overly defensive or obsessive or paranoid tendencies, sexually aggressive behavior, tendency to overreact to criticism. So these are things that as managers you can observe and pay attention to. Next is dismissing violent employees. You should use caution when firing or disciplining violent employees. One is analyze and anticipate based on the person's history what kind of aggressive behavior to expect. Then have a security guard nearby when dismissal takes place. And clear away furniture and things the person might throw. Don't wear loose clothing that the person might grab. And don't make it sound as if you are accusing the employee. Instead, say that according to company policy, you are required to take action. And maintain the person's dignity and try to emphasize something good about the employee. And provide job counseling for terminated employees to help get the employee over the traumatic post-dismissal adjustment. And consider obtaining restraining orders against those who have exhibited a tendency to act violently in the workplace. Human resource managers should understand restraining orders and the process for obtaining them. Dealing with angry employees, that is also something that we need to look into. So, what do you do when confronted by an angry, potential explosive employee? So, here are some suggestions. One is make eye contact. Stop what you're doing and give your full attention. Then speak in a calm voice and be open and honest. Let the person have his or her say. Ask for specific examples of what the person is upset about. Be careful to define the problem. Ask open-ended questions and explore all sides of the issue. And then listen. As one expert says, often angry people simply want to be listened to. They need a supportive, empathetic ear from someone they can trust. And last but not the least, understand the legal issues in reducing workplace violence. It is sensible to try to screen out potentially violent employees, but doing so incurs legal risk. Most states have policies that encourage the employment and rehabilitation of ex-offenders, and some states therefore limit the use of criminal records in hiring decisions. Aside from federal law, most states prohibit discrimination under any circumstances based on arrest records and on prior convictions unless a direct relationship exists between the prior conviction and the job, or the employment presents an unreasonable risk. And developing a violent employee profile could end up merely describing a mental impairment and violate the Americans with Disabilities Act. Most employers today have occupational security and safety programs, and instituting a basic facility security program involves analyzing the current level of risk and then installing mechanical, natural, and organizational security systems. We've come to the end of this chapter. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. The next session, we would be discussing managing global human resources. Stay tuned, and goodbye.